I do not discount the very real fact that for many people this is a difficult holiday. It too often reminds us of family trauma or disconnect or loss. And for many people, this is a time that's only saccharine sentimentality. It's excessive consumer spending, attempts to cover up relationship dysfunction, and superficiality. But today, we're going to focus on joy. The church has erred by not preaching enough about joy. We have emphasized our sinful state almost to the exclusion of the Genesis gospel, which is we are all made in the image of God. In her book, Laugh Your Way to Grace, Susan Sparks wrote that she was raised in a church where you could walk in, sit through the service, and then walk out 3 inches shorter, bent over from all the guilt. It seems to me that the exact opposite of joy is guilt. And I'm going to propose that we start a movement toward a juicy, joy-filled Christianity. But it's not just a holiday season or just Christmas Day, but rather year-round, 24/7 kind of experience. The only way to get to such a movement is to get rid of our guilt and our fear. Now, in the work that I do, helping people reconnect their spirits and their bodies, the first order of business is to address the guilt and the shame. That has to go. Living in strict conformity to rules and fear of judgment is destructive and is completely at odds with the life and teachings of Jesus. It makes a mockery of the Christmas story or of God becoming a child, a human one, just like us. So according to a pastor, Alan Jones, there are 2 characteristics of Christian life. They are freedom and joy. In his book, Rethinking Christianity, he writes, freedom requires the question of being human remains open. That's the free part. No judgment, just openness toward possibilities. And he continues, joy naturally flows from the experience of being truly free. The ancient formula is the glory of God is a human being fully alive. Freedom leads to joy that leads to being fully alive. And when we are fully alive, we know joy here. So first, to get to a juicy, joy-filled Christianity, we must live into our freedom. Personally discerning and following our conscience, keeping love in mind, keeping grace in mind, using the example of Jesus' life. Otherwise, live freely. We follow our hearts, and when we fail, sometimes in the doing we recognize it, and sometimes after the fact we realize it wasn't a good decision, we are already forgiven, accepted just as we are. Freedom and joy, and our purpose is to be fully alive. How do we get to that kind of freedom? Well, a starting point might be the words of an esteemed medieval theologian. Actually, he was declared a heretic, but we won't go into that. Meister Eckart, sometimes those are the best people. He said, God is voluptuous and delicious. Now, what do you do with that? Voluptuous and delicious. And when we live in the freedom of Christ, when we live joy-filled lives, we reflect a divinity who is voluptuous and delicious. This is what it is to imagine a joy-filled, juicy Christianity, one with no fear and no guilt. So, let's turn to Luke's story in the 2nd chapter. We heard this last week as well. In that region, there were shepherds living in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. And then an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. Watch that. But the angel said to them, do not be afraid, for see, I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people. To you is born this day in the city of David a Savior who is the Messiah, the Lord. By telling this story, The writer of Luke is preparing us for the wider gospel story of the life of Jesus as it unfolds. He's saying, from the very beginning, when God is a child, something significant happens. When God is a child, Mary already intuits it. The angels sing it, as do the shepherds. God does not come in the grand halls of a palace, as might be expected, but in a lowly manger. Not with angelic wings and a celestial trumpet, as many are still looking for, but in a small town of Bethlehem. Not as a general or a royal army commander, as one might think would be necessary, but as a child, a baby, in fact, a human baby like our own, like one of us. And we all know the rest of the Luke story. The angels experienced joy and they sang. The shepherds traveled to Bethlehem. They experienced joy, glorifying and praising God when they returned to their flocks. And Mary ponders these things in her heart. And her song of joy is in the previous chapter. It's called Magnificat. But we have a song that I would like for us to sing later that tells the story, the song of Mary. It is this, the Canticle of the Turning. My soul cries out with a joyful shout that the God of my heart is great. You fixed your sight on your servant's plight, and our weakness you did not spurn. So from east to west shall God's name be blessed. Could the world be about to turn? From the halls of power to the fortress tower, so not a stone will be left on stone. Let the king beware, for your justice tears every tyrant from the throne. The hungry poor shall weep no more, for the food they can never earn. There are tables spread, every mouth be fed, for the world is about to turn. Though the nations rage from age to age, we remember who holds us fast. God's mercy must deliver us from the conqueror's crushing grasp. This saving word that our forebears heard is the promise that holds us bound till the spear and rod can be crushed by God, who is turning the world around. My heart shall sing for the day you bring. Let the fires of your justice burn. Wipe away all tears, for the dawn draws near and the world is about to turn. Read Mary's song in different language of Luke in the first chapter. So Luke is preparing us for the incredible story of a turning. A baby grows into a brown-skinned Palestinian refugee and then lives by the law of love, and then turns everything upside down with his teachings. And those gospels, that teaching according to the writer of the Gospel of John is this: if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept God's commandments and abide in God's love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Joy follows love, and love turns the world upside down. Every time humanity reaches out in love, something or someone is transformed. Every single time. It's like the ripples in a pond when a stone goes in, farther and farther. And the song says the world is about to turn. Why? Because we put the love out there. Now, already we can begin to see that these birth stories, the theme of Luke, is that emerges later in the life of Jesus, that the last shall be first, and the weak shall be strong, and none shall be afraid. The first thing Mary hears from the angel Gabriel is, do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor in God. Why? What did she do to deserve God's favor? Nothing, as far as we know. That's what love is. That's what love is about. When you have a voluptuous and delicious God who loves through and through. Why would one ever fear if we truly believed that? If we believed that love was stronger than the power of death itself, mightier than the most powerful dictator, if we believed the force and power of an almighty love is flowing over us, through us, and in us, why would we ever be afraid? Someone wrote that the miracle of Christmas is not really about Jesus in the manger, but something else that really happens that is far more magnificent, and it is joy. Why is it that on Christmas we give ourselves permission to feel an almost unrestrained joy? This week, strangers were speaking to me in the subway. I had people I didn't even know talking to me. We are more hospitable at this time. We're more patient and caring with those we love, more generous with others. Love softens us, and we limit it to this day and this season. We feel perhaps a sense of abundance right now, more aware of the preciousness of life itself, more open with others, and we share in more intimate ways. Because it's Christmas after all. Can you imagine what it would feel like? This is juicy joy. Got it? It is as if we're looking around a confining room of our lives and we look up and we see a room without a roof. That's Pharrell Williams' song. And we rise like a hot air balloon that could go into space. Joy and happiness. Love leads to joy, Jesus taught. I have to tell you a story. I have gone to a lot of cathedrals in my life, even in Europe, and I keep looking for sacred space. And I can't find it. All I see are all of these huge edifices and stained glass and architectural wonders, and all I think about is all the money it took to build that and all the poor people who were starving who were building it themselves. It doesn't work for me. Can't find God in those cathedrals. So I visited Plunkett's chapel in Ireland, and he lived ages ago. It was a theologian type, and by now the chapel is just at the outside of the chapel. So I walk into the chapel, and there on the floor is grass. And I look through the windows, and there's, of course, no glass, because that's been gone for hundreds of years. And I see the Irish landscape and all of that greenery. And then I look up, and there's no roof either. And then I felt the power of God, because there was no roof confining me. And I saw God in that green, beautiful landscape, the nature that was around me. I smelled God in the air, and I knew joy. Yes, the shepherds knew joy. The angels knew joy. Mary knew joy. By choosing love and joy, we lay aside the pervasive cynicism of the world and all our guilt and shame. And we can sing in a juicy, joy-filled place inside ourselves. Let's imagine, as Jean showed us, what would happen if we really believed the promises of an upside-down world, where the last shall be first and the first shall be last, and the weak shall be strong, and the lion lies down with the lamb, and they turn swords into plowshares. Imagine if we relied on God's promise never to abandon or forsake us during even every single minute of our worst days. And in the dark valleys of the shadow of death, we walk because we know God is walking with us by our side. Wouldn't our fears evaporate? Imagine living in a Christmas spirit the other 364 days of the year. Would we become, as the Apostle Paul says, a fool for Christ? laughing at the joy of living one day, one more beautiful day, laughing because nothing separates us from the power of love. Imagine gulping down this life gift like the ice-cold lemonade on a hot August day. If we get to juicy joy, our hearts would sing hallelujahs with the angels. Our feet would dance with the shepherds as they walk back home to their sheep. And when we live in joy, then we sing and we dance and we show that none shall be afraid. The significance of the Christmas story is God among us, God with us. The Gospel according to Thomas says, Jesus says, split the wood, I am there. Lift the stone, you will find me there. This is the Christmas story, God with us. Listen to a theologian from the 11th century. We awaken in Christ's body as Christ awakens in our bodies. And my poor hand is Christ. He enters my foot and is infinitely me. I move my hand, and wonderfully my hand becomes Christ, becomes all of Him. For God is indivisibly whole, seamless in the Godhead. I move my foot, and at once He appears like lightning. Do my words seem blasphemous? Then open your heart to Him and let yourself receive the one who is opening to you so deeply. For if we genuinely love Him, we awake inside Christ's body, where all of our body, all over, every most hidden part of it is realized in joy in Him, and He makes us utterly real. And everything that is hurt, everything that seemed to us dark and harsh and shameful, maimed and ugly and irreparably damaged is in Him transformed and recognized as whole, as lovely and radiant in His light. We awaken as the beloved in every last part of our body. When love rules, the joke is on us because it becomes an upside down world and things begin to turn, for it is all about God's hand in our lives. Made in the image of God, we are created to love. And then, with juicy joy welling up 365 days a year, life begins to feel like a room without a roof. God is doing something new, and the world is about to turn. Love leads to joy, the juiciest of joys. Imagine that.